spotlight presentation from the Global Democracy Coalition, representing over 100 civil society organizations that work to support democracy and human rights around the world.
Hello, we're the Global Democracy Coalition.
And we have a message from civil society organizations. We're here to help,
just like we have been.
For decades, members of civil society have shown up to nondescript buildings, grand halls,
or out in our communities to address humanity's most pressing challenges,
or advance its greatest possibilities.
From apartheid to the fall of the wall,
the Quit movement to the Umbrella Revolution
in Ukraine and Iran,
and aside democracy movements around the world, civil society organizations have been persistently advancing democracy.
While we've faced headwinds in a context of shrinking civic space,
when you zoom out to the century or millennia level, the progress we have made together is extraordinary.
But we're eager to make even more progress with you.
When we're at the table and empowered, we bring knowledge and resolve to help achieve what has long been just beyond attainability.
And now is the time to act.
Autocrats and dictators should be worried.
We have more tools, knowledge, and capacity than ever before. Though naturally, there is more to do.
And we have to do it together.
We need governments to step up.
Now more than ever.
To partner with us and drive democracy forward.
Globally. In 2021, the Global Democracy Coalition was formed.
Following the first Summit for Democracy, we convened over 100 organizations from civil society, academic institutions, and international organizations with a singular purpose: to strengthen, advance, and protect democracy.
With a diverse and dynamic collection of institutional knowledge and experiences, now connected and cataloged,
our coalition is formalizing informal networks,
bringing data on best practices,
championing agendas, convening and collaborating to advance democracy.
With passion and creativity, we are formalizing this network of actors, strengthening the relationships between civil society and government,
and shining lights on efforts that bolster democracy. Since the first Summit for Democracy, partners of the coalition have worked in more than 100 countries to strengthen democracy in different ways.
Supported nationwide consultations for Sierra Leone's first gender equality law.
Supported the democratic opposition in developing a federal democracy charter for a democratic Myanmar.
Supported multi-party dialogue in countries such as Ethiopia.
Supported human rights and democracy defenders fleeing authoritarian repression with emergency grants. Created dialogue spaces for civil society to engage with governments in improving and further developing new Summit for Democracy commitments in countries such as Nepal, DRC, and Moldova.
Built an international network of democracy activists inside and in exile from authoritarian contexts
to facilitate strategy exchanges and provide skills training.
Participated in creating the global network for securing electoral integrity to strengthen efforts to protect elections.
Co-led or engaged in all Summit for Democracy cohorts, working with civil society and governments to identify actions to strengthen democracy. For example, providing advocacy and action grants to strengthen youth activism.
And we've hosted dialogues to discuss everything from Summit for Democracy country commitments to the work of the cohorts and to model democratic commitments and civil society engagement.
We've mapped our programs by thematic areas of engagement and country coverage. Just in the year since our formation, we have facilitated exchanges of critical information through building a digital democracy library of open source knowledge and training resources
to facilitate access to knowledge on democracy building and advocacy.
The Global Democracy Coalition is supporting civil society and governments to coordinate and accelerate democracy.
Our partners know that civil society plays a critical role in achieving our collective aims of enhancing, building, and securing democracy.
Within our broad coalition and among citizens around the world, we have the commitment, knowledge, and resolve to renew the most effective, inclusive, and sustainable form of government there is: democracy.
But for us to be truly effective, we need to be working hand in hand with government, with you.
Partner with us.
Partner with us. Let's drive democracy forward globally.
And now a spotlight presentation from Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya and Natalia Pinchuk of Belarus.
We are from Belarus, a country that is not free, a country that has lived under a brutal tyranny for 28 years, a country where people are deprived of their basic human rights, a country governed by fear, where even whispering the word freedom can land you in jail. The hardest lesson we've learned these years is that freedom is never given for free. It comes with a demand. And independence is not guaranteed forever either. These values require courage, responsibility, and self-sacrifice. They need people who are ready to put the interest of others first. And one of these people is Natalia. I met her only recently, but I have long admired her bravery. The case of her husband, noted democracy activist and political prisoner Ales Bialiatsky, is legendary amongst all Belarusians. For 35 years, Natalia supported Ales as he fought peacefully for Belarus independence, taking a risk in times of communist dictatorship, as he defended Belarusians who were persecuted by the regime. A year ago, when Ales was detained, she became his main advocate. During the presentation of the Nobel Peace Prize to him last year, she spoke on his behalf, calling on the world to be decisive in support of the Belarusian people in their fight for democracy and survival of Belarus as an independent state. Many call our revolution a women's revolution precisely because of courageous people, such as Natalia.
Многія гады Беларусь была шэрай плямай на мапе Еўропы, нягледзячы на мірную барацьбу супраць дыктатуры многіх адважных людзей, у тым ліку майго мужа. Але ў 2020 годзе вобраз Беларусі змяніўся. На здзіўленне многіх выклік самаўладства кінула жанчына. Светлана Тsikhanouskaya не збіралася ісці ў палітыку, але калі арыштавалі яе мужа Сергея, які вырашыў ісці ў прэзідэнты, яна зарэгістравалася замест яго. Улада не ўспрыняла яе ўсур'ёз і моцна паплацілася. Светлана перамагла. Але рэжым не прыняў волю народа і пры падтрымцы Масквы пачаў тэрор супраць беларусаў. Светлана ж працуе дзеля свайго народу. Яна стала сапраўднай лідаркай у вачах беларусаў і свету. Яна стварае будучыню для беларускай дэмакратычнай дзяржавы, пераадольваючы страх і траўмы. І я ведаю, як цяжка быць моцнай, калі твой муж у турме. Я сумую па мужу Алесю і адчуваю увесь боль Светланы.
When you get married, you vow loyalty to each other. We wanted to live simple lives and raise our children in love. But life doesn't always pan out the way you hoped. This is when you have to stay loyal to your vows. The situation in Belarus and Ukraine today is also a test of loyalty for the world. How strong is the marriage between democracies and freedom? How strong is the commitment to self-determination? We, women, stay true to our husbands who are taken hostage and tortured by the dictator. Our country and our people are hostages too. Yet the people of Belarus stay true to the ideals of democracy. We want freedom for our husbands. We want freedom for our country.
Мы гаворым з вамі не толькі таму, што мы маці альбо жонкі. І не толькі таму, што маем дзяцей, якіх любім і абараняем. Мы тут, бо мы беларусы. Мы тут таму, што ад гэтага рэжыму пакутуюць людзі. Рэжым садзіць у турмы ўсіх тых, хто не згодны, і спальвае нашы надзеі. І кошт гэтага – магчымая страта незалежнасці Беларусі.
Dictatorship is like cancer. It grows unless it is removed completely. If just one cancer cell remains, it will return with deadly force. And the cancer of tyranny must be fought, not compromised. After the crackdown of 2020, the regime felt complete impunity and became a threat to the entire region. It hijacked a Ryanair flight, orchestrated a migration crisis, and eventually dragged our country into Russia's bloody war against Ukraine.
Калі пачалася вайна, у Беларусі ўзмацніліся рэпрэсіі. Тысячы былі кінутыя за краты не толькі за пратэсты супраць рэжыму, але і за антываенную пазіцыю. Асабліва рэпрэсуюць тых, хто выступае за незалежнасць Беларусі ад Расіі, абараняе беларускую ідэнтычнасць, мову і культуру.
The fact is that independence, freedom and peace are interconnected. The war of Russia against Ukraine clearly showed that the struggle for independence from Imperial Russia is also a struggle for freedoms and human rights. And the fight against the pro-Russian dictatorship in Belarus is a contribution to the victory of a free Ukraine, because the fates of Ukraine and Belarus are intertwined. War in Europe will never end unless our common enemy, the tyrants of Moscow and Minsk, are defeated, not appeased.
Безумоўна, перамены ў Беларусі справа саміх беларусаў. Мы яе самі распачалі і завершым. Але шлях мірнага, негвалтоўнага супраціву, які мы абралі, будзе паспяховы толькі пры моцнай міжнароднай падтрымцы і салідарнасці. Я веру, што і Алесь Беляцкі, і Сергей Ціхановскі, і тысячы беларусаў выйдуць з турму. Я веру, што беларусы перамогуць, бо наша барацьба справядлівая. Мы адбудуем нашу краіну і аб'яднаем наш народ вакол ідэі свабоды.
Democracy may seem fragile, and tyranny can seem invincible. But what we all know is that dictatorship ends in chaos, whilst democracy ends in prosperity and peace. Belarusians have already made their choice of free European democratic and stable future. So help us to defend this choice. Help us to win our country back. Живи Беларусь!
Живе Беларусь!
Democracy delivers trust, progress and freedom, something we can never take for granted.
Democracy delivers free, fair and indeed transparent elections.
Democracy delivers a world where instead of the government owning the people own the government.
Democracy delivers a secure, stable and prosperous world for future generations.
Democracy delivers the freedom to choose your own path.
Democracy delivers freedom, peace and prosperity.
Democracy delivers freedom, prosperity and truly inclusive digital society.
Democracy delivers liberty, equality, opportunity and justice as long as we keep working for it.
Democracy delivers.
We on? Wait for the cue. Shall I begin? Hello, everyone. Let me start by apologizing for the slight cold I have. That's the only thing that's happening to me these days. Let me start by thanking everyone for participating in the second Summit of Democracies, for democracy, I should say. But more importantly, thank you for the work you've put in over the last 15 months to deliver on commitments you made to each other and to our peoples for the first summit from the first summit of democracy. Look, you know, that's the power of these summits. Not just to speak high-minded words and shine a spotlight on those critical issues, but to galvanize action and translate to concrete progress for people around the world. That's how we make democracy deliver for everyone. And here's what I hope everyone gathered here and everyone watching around the world takes away from this summit. It's working. It's working. You know, when we gathered here in December of 2021, the sentiment in too many places around the world was that democracy's best days were behind us. Democracy had declined by some measures for 15 consecutive years. But this year, we can say there's a different story to tell. Thanks to the commitment of leaders and global gathered today and the persistence of people in every region of the world demanding their rights be respected and their voices being heard, we're seeing real indications that we're turning the tide here. As I often say, we're at an inflection point in history here. When the decisions we make today are going to affect the course of our world for the next several decades, for certain. We're going forward from this summit. Our job is to keep building on our progress so we don't start heading in the wrong direction again, to keep the momentum going. This is a turning point for our world toward greater freedom, greater dignity, and greater democracy. Here in the United States, we've demonstrated that our democracy can still do big things and deliver important progress for working Americans. We're bringing down the cost of essentials like prescription drugs and health insurance premiums. We're giving families a little bit more, my dad used to say, a little bit more breathing room. We're rebuilding America's infrastructure, driving innovation and tackling the climate crisis all while creating good union jobs and investing in communities that too often have been left behind in the past. We're also demonstrating the resilience of American democracy. During our free, fair, and secure elections last fall, America's first national election since January 6th attack on our Capitol, voters resoundingly and roundly rejected the voices of extremism, attacking and undermining our democracy. The right to vote, to have your vote counted, is a threshold of democracy and liberty everywhere in the world. And with it, anything is possible. Without it, in my view, nothing is possible. That's why earlier this year, I was proud to sign the Bipartisan Electoral Count Reform Act to ensure American elections continue to reflect the will of the American people and protect the peaceful transfer of power. You know, we're going to keep working to further strengthen protections by working to pass what we call the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. They're just to further strengthen our democracy. And it's not just the United States that's delivering on our commitment and demonstrating the power of democracy. Angola is taking steps to build an independent judiciary, creating three new regional courts of appeal, which are going to help process cases more quickly. The Dominican Republic has modernized its anti-corruption law to create more than 100 anti-corruption offices at local levels. Croatia is implementing a multi-year anti-corruption plan to increase government transparency and better oversee public procurement. And there are many more examples I could give, but I'm not going to take the time. In many other countries, for every person from countries taking the first steps toward reform to well-established democracies, of people making real changes to protect and strengthen their democracy. Look, all we know, it's not easy. This has never been easy. Democracy is hard work. The work of democracy is never finished. It's never laid down and that's it. All you have to do. It must be protected constantly. We have to continually renew our commitment, continually strengthen our institutions, root out corruption where we find it, seek to build consensus and reject political violence, give hate and extremism no safe harbor. We have to continue our efforts to advance the rights and dignity, and I emphasize the word dignity, of all people, including women and girls. You know, because wherever women and girls are under threat, democracy, peace, and stability are at risk as well. And we can't achieve our goals if we're leaving more than half the world's population out of the solution. We just heard from two incredible women who made an incredible case regarding Belarus. They're not only women, they're leaders. They deserve, and all women deserve, to be represented. Moreover, when we advance equality and racial justice and invest in young people, protect the LGBTQ plus individuals, our societies are not only fairer, but they're stronger and more successful. Democracy demands full and equal participation of all of our citizens. That's how we unleash the human potential. and put ourselves in the strongest possible position to take on the shared challenges. And I emphasize shared challenges. And when democracies stand together, we reinforce and amplify each other's efforts to great effect. And we've seen it over and over again. Democracy stepping up to lead and to solve problems together, not just for our own people, but for the world. From our work to coordinate a global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, to strengthen global health security, so we're better prepared to prevent and respond to future global health threats, to our commitment to raise our ambitions on climate goals that we have, to preserve our planet, literally preserve our planet for future generations, to making sure parents can feed their children, strengthening food security by building more sustainable and resilient food systems around the globe, and the unprecedented unity we've seen from democracies condemning Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine and standing in solidarity with the brave Ukrainian people as they defend their democracy. So today, the United States is building on our enduring commitment to boost democracy globally. At the first Summit of Democracy, I launched the Presidential Initiative for Democratic Renewal, committed more than $400 million to shore up transparent and accountable governance, support for media freedom, to fighting international corruption, stand with democracy and democratic reformers, promote technology that advances democracy, defend elections. Now, working in close cooperation with the United States Congress, we plan to add another $690 million for new funding for the presidential initiative over the next 2 years. And over the course of 3 years, my administration intends to work with Congress to commit $9.5 billion across all our efforts to advance democracy around the world. We're all safer when that occurs. We're creating a new Bureau of Democracy and Human Rights and Governance at USAID to implement many of these funding commitments to enhance our support for democratic initiatives globally. You know, one key focus of our democracy work will be in making sure that technologies can continue to develop that are used to advance democratic governance, not used to undermine it. As part of this, early this week, I signed an executive order here in the United States to restrict U.S. government's use of commercial spyware that has been abused to target dissidents, activists, and journalists around the world, including in the United States. U.S. taxpayer dollars should not support companies that are willing to sell their products to abet human rights violations. And I want to thank those countries who are joining us this week in committing to regulate the use of commercial spyware. This effort is one of many my administration is leading in the digital space for strengthening tools for internet freedom, to better protecting activists and journalists from cyber threats, harassment, abuse, and shaping emerging technologies like artificial intelligence so that they deliver and develop things that are in line with our values. And as you can probably tell, strengthening democracy is a subject about which I'm somewhat passionate. I believe this is a defining challenge of our age. And today, we can say with pride that the democracies of the world are getting stronger, not weaker. Autocracies of the world are getting weaker, not stronger. That's a direct result of all of us coming together with confidence in ourselves and conviction in our cause. Governments from around the globe, representatives of civil society and business, democratic activists and trade unionists, people who refuse to stand silent at attempts to erode their rights. All of us are making the choice to be leaders of our world and what our world needs, to make democracy stronger, to keep the torch of liberty burning for ourselves and generations to come. We have to keep going, and we will. Thanks to the Republic of Korea for stepping forward to host the next Summit for Democracies. And we'll sustain this forum as a driver of progress, and the anchor for our commitment to one another. So thank you all again for participating. I look forward to all of you, each one of you, to hearing from you. And I know I'm not going to turn this over to the President of Slovakia. Madam President, it's all yours.
President Biden, Excellencies, dear all, thank you for bringing us together. This is the time we must all mobilize. We need to defend and strengthen democracy. As a NATO and European Union member, Slovakia will do its share, not just in Ukraine, our neighbor. Russia's aggression is a threat to global peace and democracy. Our support, including military aid, helps the Ukrainians protect their rights in line with the UN Charter. The world support for Ukraine's defense fight must continue for as long as it takes. This is our joint investment in peace and democracy. But we must also do more to strengthen democracy at home. Our citizens need to see that democracy responds to their needs. The democracy guarantees true equality before the law, better public service, more transparency, and less corruption. They must feel that democracy helps bridge, not amplify, differences. Slovakia had a productive year of action. We focused on improving the rule of law and our judicial system. Independent judiciary must be a public service available to all citizens and businesses. We introduced a new court system, which has increased accountability of judges and prosecutors while preserving their independence. Corruption is another major threat to democracy. It destroys public trust in our institutions. We set up a new independent agency to protect whistleblowers. Our register of beneficial owners helps prevent money laundering in our public procurement system. It will serve as a legal standard across Europe. We invite other global partners to join. Democracies also face attacks on free media and increase of disinformation. These are mostly spread through social media. We cannot be naive and allow freedom of speech to be a cover for verbal crimes, hate speech, and lies. 5 years ago, a young Slovak investigative journalist and his fiancée were murdered for his work. Last year, a radicalized teenager killed 2 young queer people in the streets of our capital. He got radicalized on social media. In response, we launched a system to protect journalists if they face threats. We also increased our support for media freedom and independent journalism in Ukraine and the Western Balkans. But we must do more and increase the accountability of social media platforms. Their business model is based on encouraging the lowest of emotions, polarization and fragmentation. Dear all, we are living in times of several crises. We cannot allow democracy to be the victim of this crisis, because democracy is the solution. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, President Čaputová. We'd like to turn now to Malawi President Chakwera. Mr. President.
Your Excellency, Mr. Joseph Biden, President of the United States of America, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, when Ukraine came under attack just over a year ago, every democracy represented at this summit understood that this was an aggression not just against Ukraine, but against liberty itself. It was therefore altogether appropriate and right for every nation that loves freedom to not only condemn it with words, but to stand with Ukraine with action. When I spoke with President Zelenskyy a few months ago to pledge my support of his country's cause, it was out of my conviction that when any democracy comes under attack in a way that claims the lives of hundreds of its citizens, displaces hundreds of thousands of its people, destroys its economy and infrastructure, and threatens the enjoyment of freedom and human rights within its borders. It is simply not enough for other democracies to offer words of solidarity. It is therefore commendable that the nations gathered here have continued to give Ukraine the resource support it needs to safeguard its liberty. And I pray that this deployment of support continues. My appeal today is that this same spirit be extended to democracies like Malawi that are also under attack from a different adversary, climate change. In the last 3 weeks, Tropical Cyclone Freddy has killed over 500 Malawians, with just as many still missing, has destroyed over 40 roads, washed away over 100,000 homes, leaving over 500,000 people homeless, and their enjoyment of freedom and human rights in jeopardy. And considering that Malawi did not bring this attack on itself, but is suffering the consequences of industrial actions by other nations, I ask you this one question. Is it not a moral duty for you who love freedom to come to Malawi's aid with substantial resources for relief and reconstruction that address the global challenge of climate injustice? I believe it is. So I implore you all to respond to Malawi's present distress call with more than words of solidarity and crumbs of tokenism. That is the only way we can show the world that we are as committed to seeing democracy deliver climate justice in the global South. While we are grateful for the initial support we received, I must commend President Zelenskyy's approach, for his government has taken the initiative to first ask us what we need so as to respond in ways that make a lasting difference. That's the way to go. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, President Chakwera. We turn now to President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President Biden. Thank you for this summit, for another step in consolidating the world in defense of freedom. Dear colleagues, now is the decisive time, and it is our joint responsibility. What exactly will determine this time? Will we pass on to our children and grandchildren the values of freedom that we have ourselves, or will they have to fight for democracy from scratch? Modern generations of many democratic countries do not know from their life experience that freedom cannot be taken for granted. Most people can only learn about this from history textbooks, from the stories of wars of independence that took place generations ago and battles of freedom won by others. But the experience of the enemies of freedom is always fresh. They don't refer to textbooks. They know how to break democracy and destroy life. It is enough for them to have their slightest feeling that they can go unpunished, and then evil acts. This is where the threat to our values comes from. This is why democracy is in danger. Ukraine knows what it is to fight for democracy right now, and let our experience of preserving freedom during total war help protect the free world, each of your peoples. When you see Ukrainian cities burned by Russian aggression, and when you see brave Ukrainian soldiers that stop the movement of the aggression through our land, notice what you are actually seeing. This is deciding the fate of not only Ukraine, this is deciding the fate of everyone who is used to living freely. Russian propagandists and accomplices like that. Allegedly, the West is fighting against Russia on the territory of Ukraine. It's worse understanding what is really going on. It is Ukraine that tyrannical Russia is able to reach with its bloody hands, with missiles and artillery, bombs and tanks. But the Kremlin's ambitions does not, and just where its hands reach. Russia has been at war with all of you for a long time, with the democracies of the world. It fights via disinformation, election interference, espionage, corruption, exporting, cybercrime, by trying to trigger an energy crisis and price explosions in markets that will hit your people with insane electricity or gas bills. Look, the Kremlin is trying to turn even food provision into a weapon, blocks the sea to create a shortage in the global food market. Why is this happening? This is war. Ladies and gentlemen, this is war precisely against freedom and democracy. Every foe of freedom acts in the same way. I emphasize they act. The enemies of freedom have not lost a single year in recent decades. They channeled all their time and unlimited money, which they gained in trade with the free world, to weaken and to corrupt and to undermine democracy. But have all the efforts of the free world been aimed at limiting the aggressive potential of tyrants and autocrats and at bringing them to legal responsibility for their crimes? Unfortunately, no. We have to fix it. Democracy must be able to act and act in advance. Democracy must learn to be uncompromising in the face of evil. The spirit of democracy is to find a compromise, but this only works for internal freedom in a given country. We should get rid of the illusion that compromising with evil can give something to freedom. The enemies of democracy must lose. And only these can be the basis of true security for democracy. Embrace this Ukrainian determination. Ukrainian democracy maintains absolute internal unity, even in the face of a total war against our people. To win is our national goal. What does it mean to win? Our answer is clear: to preserve freedom, to preserve dignity, to preserve our land. But what is the strategy of the free world in relation to totalitarian Russia, which is looking for how to create more totalitarian allies in the world? Is there such a clear strategy? I will tell you what it should be. Clear answer: evil must lose their war. If it loses now, it will know that it will always lose everywhere. First, we should not think how to save Putin's face in order to allegedly reduce the cost of fighting him. We should think how to preserve respect for democracy in those countries where freedom has yet to win. Second, when a fire breaks out, firefighters cannot wait months for fire trucks to be provided or accept that fire hydrants should be mandatory only for short distances. It works the same way in war. The more restrictions on the defenders, the more casualties and destruction, because the flames of aggression now know bounds. That is why the defense of democracy must have all the weapons that will reliably guarantee the defeat of the aggressor. Third, Russians must contribute to protecting the world from their Kremlin, whose impunity they have tolerated. It is necessary to look for, freeze, and direct for recovering not only individual assets of the aggressor state and individual related parties, but all assets of Russia and Russian wealthy who have traded silence for increasing their wealth. They must have a motive to act in defense of freedom and to bring an end to this aggression and the Kremlin's terrorist rule. Dear colleagues, war makes things crystal clear. These days, I visited our regions near the front line, and there you can see what aspects of leadership are needed now. When our fighters repel the assaults near Bakhmut, they cannot wait for weeks before firing an artillery shot in response to the enemy's actions. The fire must be immediate and neutralize the threat. All our decisions should be just as quick, but for some reason, sanctions against Russia are much slower than Russia's aggression. Global pressure on Russia elite is weaker than its motive to accept the Kremlin. Support for Ukrainian soldiers in the trenches is less far-reaching than the weapons of the terrorists acting against us. And your own willingness to defend your democracies is less resolute than the intentions of those who want a world war against democracy. Democracy needs a victory now, this year, not some other time, not over time, now. And we are able to ensure this, Ukraine and everyone who helps. And I'm sure we will, but act, please, colleagues. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your support, Mr. President, and to all colleagues. Glory to all who fight for freedom. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you very much, President Zelenskyy. The floor is now to the President of Ecuador, President Lasso.
Querido Presidente Biden, queridos presidentes, colegas, ha pasado más de un año desde nuestro último encuentro, punto en el que nos mostrábamos optimistas de una recuperación post-pandemia que permitiera la reactivación económica, la adecuada atención a las poblaciones vulnerables más afectadas y el incremento de la cooperación entre los países para asimilar y aprender las lecciones que dejó aquel episodio de la historia mundial reciente. Desafortunadamente, la situación cambió. Desde fines de febrero del año pasado, enfrentamos una realidad marcada por la violación de los principios de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, con la injustificada invasión de Rusia a Ucrania, que ha puesto en peligro a la paz y seguridad internacional y ha derivado en una crisis humanitaria que se sigue deteriorando día tras día y ha exacerbado la amenaza nuclear. Aquello ha traído como consecuencia problemas globales adicionales como la inseguridad alimentaria en el mundo y graves efectos en las economías, en particular de los países en desarrollo. Frente a ello, ¿qué nos queda? La democracia, porque la democracia se posiciona como uno de los valores más importantes en el desarrollo de los países, porque la democracia se consolida con más democracia, porque la democracia permite optar por la paz, el respeto a los derechos humanos y la conservación del planeta. Además de los problemas a escala global que afectan a todos los estados, existen flagelos cuya influencia nefasta en el ser humano y en la sociedad se ha multiplicado. Me refiero al crimen organizado transnacional. Este crimen organizado transnacional es una de las más peligrosas amenazas a la democracia. Los alcances que tienen las organizaciones delictivas dedicadas al narcotráfico, trata de personas, tráfico de migrantes, tráfico de armas, el asesinato a sueldo o sicariato y la minería ilegal, entre otras formas criminales, tienen el potencial de minar las bases de la democracia. Estas organizaciones buscan incansablemente influir en los distintos ámbitos de la política y de la justicia. Requerimos acciones urgentes a escala regional y global. Incluso la legítima protesta social y las diferencias políticas, herramientas normales en un sistema democrático, han sido manchadas por la maliciosa ambición de estas organizaciones criminales. Hoy vemos que organizaciones criminales estarían vinculadas con actores y grupos sociales y políticos cuyo objetivo es promover la desestabilización, la ingobernabilidad y el caos para operar libremente. No vamos a permitirlo. El éxito de la lucha contra el crimen organizado transnacional depende en gran medida de la cooperación internacional, pues los recursos y sofisticación de las estructuras criminales superan las capacidades nacionales de muchos de nuestros países. De allí que esta cumbre sea la mejor oportunidad para reiterar nuestro compromiso con la democracia, pero además para plasmar nuestra voluntad en hechos e iniciativas que permitan la efectiva consolidación de este régimen político y del conjunto de valores, actitudes y creencias que implica la democracia. Es hora de enfrentar la raíz de varios de los problemas que aquejan a nuestros pueblos, y el primer problema es esos intentos de desestabilización de la democracia. Sea que nazca de un deseo desaforado de poder, sea que provenga de la frustración de no haber alcanzado los votos mayoritarios, sea que surjan del influjo de intereses malsanos que apuntan a medrar en el caos. Estos intentos no dejan en paz a nuestras democracias. Felizmente, esas olas revueltas se estrellan contra los muros de la propia democracia, cuando los poderes constituidos son sólidos y cuando los mecanismos de control están en pie. Otros factores que hay que corregir para que no corroan la democracia tienen que ver con el bienestar de los ciudadanos. La falta de empleo o el estancamiento económico tienen que ser resueltos mediante activas políticas de inversión privada y gestión pública. Nuestros ciudadanos merecen países con oportunidades, libres de corrupción y violencia, países en los que poner en riesgo la vida para migrar en busca de un mejor futuro no represente siquiera una opción. En la primera cumbre, mi país adoptó varios compromisos para fortalecer las políticas de protección a los derechos humanos, equidad de género, atención a personas con discapacidad, así como para mejorar los procesos de transparencia y combatir la corrupción. El Ecuador ha cumplido con sus compromisos y ha identificado pasos adicionales para garantizar la continuidad de estos procesos en beneficio de la ciudadanía. Señoras y señores jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, la democracia es el elemento sine qua non para el desarrollo de nuestros pueblos. Y por ella y para ella nos asociamos y buscamos en conjunto hacer frente a los desafíos globales que aquejan a la humanidad. Les invito a continuar trabajando juntos en el ámbito de la comunidad internacional, defendiendo la democracia y las libertades, preservando la paz y generando esfuerzos conjuntos y coordinados para asegurar el mejor de los futuros para nuestros pueblos. Muchas gracias y que Dios nos bendiga.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We turn now to President Sandu of Moldova. Madam President.
Governments, distinguished guests, I'm honored to address today's summit and to join our allies in promoting democracy as a vehicle for peace and prosperity, security, and stability. A stable democracy is a beacon, a bright light that Moldova currently sees through a clouded lens, with a full-fledged war at our border and Kremlin-funded hybrid operations aimed at destabilizing our country. Moldova's democracy is fragile, yet we refuse to allow these perils to upend our stability, our security, our way of life. Moldova's authorities are working diligently to build a resilient nation and to consolidate people's support for democracy. But we cannot do it alone. We're seeking partners among other democracies to help us remain part of the free world and to support our quest for EU membership. This is the only way to safeguard Moldova's democracy. We face significant challenges, but we are resolute in our commitment to overcoming them. Our administration emerged from what felt like a failure of democracy, a time of corrupt politics. We saw a better way and worked hard to win people's trust. We fought for free and fair elections and for campaigns funded by transparent and legal donations. We introduced reforms aimed at uprooting corruption in customs, banking, education, and public administration. We are now fighting a significant battle against corruption in the justice sector. We know that institutional corruption and judicial dishonesty sabotages the belief that democracy can deliver security, economic opportunities, and justice. We are calling for democratic allies to join us in a global sanctions regime to identify and deter cases of grand corruption. We are proud to lead the summit's cohort on international cooperation and anti-corruption in this year of action, together with Transparency International and Basel Institute on Governance, learning from each other how to more effectively investigate high-level cases of corruption and recover illicitly acquired assets. Equally important, we need to work together more effectively to counter disinformation and propaganda. They threaten our democracies. Today, in a joint regional effort of 8 governments, our Prime Minister sent an open letter to big tech companies demanding better ways to counter the spread of false narratives that could destabilize our countries. Ladies and gentlemen, at a time of war, Moldova is a litmus test for the US, the EU member states, and other democratic nations. Our security and our faith that democracy can and will deliver must also be yours. In other words, our stability is in your interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We turn now to Niger. President Bazoum, la parole est à vous, Monsieur le Président.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis honoré et ravi de participer à vos côtés à ce sommet pour la démocratie. Je vous remercie bien vivement de cette invitation, Monsieur le Président Biden. De tout temps, les sociétés humaines se sont dotées de formes de gouvernance les plus à même de leur assurer cohésion, sécurité et pérennité. Au cœur de chaque personne réside un désir de liberté, condition sine qua non de son intégrité. Philosophes, hommes d'État et citoyens se sont investis au cours de l'histoire pour trouver la meilleure forme de gouvernement. Pour nous, engagés dans le concret, le débat philosophique et moral a été tranché par l'expérience. La démocratie est la meilleure forme de gouvernement et c'est à juste titre que Winston Churchill avait dit cyniquement qu'elle était la pire à l'exception de toutes les autres qui ont été essayées. C'est notre choix irrévocable et assumé dans le cadre duquel nous réfléchissons dans l'action sur les modalités de l'exercice du pouvoir selon les contextes propres à chaque pays et les circonstances contingentes. Ces modalités, pour autant qu'elles visent l'absolu, restent néanmoins relatives, justement. Dans mon pays, le Niger, depuis une trentaine d'années, une vague irrépressible somme des énergies des militants et citoyens engagés, mus par une volonté inflexible à imposer formellement la démocratie. Notre jeune démocratie vient de réussir en 2021 une première alternance par les urnes, reflet de la maturité du peuple et de la sagesse des dirigeants. La démocratie, matrice de la dignité et de la liberté, repose sur la capacité des citoyens à faire des choix sereins et éclairés. C'est pour cela que le Niger fait de la bonne gouvernance, condition de la stabilité des institutions étatiques et de l'éducation, surtout l'éducation des jeunes filles, ses priorités. Car nous sommes convaincus que pour que prospère la démocratie, nous avons besoin de citoyens éduqués, aptes à assumer leurs droits et leurs devoirs. La démocratie est un idéal qui se vit et se pratique. Elle ne peut être subie. Elle se mérite. Elle est fragile et nous devons toujours garder la dignité humaine et la liberté comme compas pour naviguer à travers le tumulte des crises globales et multidimensionnelles en cours. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, en ce moment historique de rupture de modèle et de soubresaut paradigmatique, des forces dénigrent et menacent la démocratie en la présentant comme un concept propre à une certaine culture. Elles mènent à cet égard un combat dont le dessein est de remettre en selle de modèles de pouvoirs autoritaires en porte-à-faux avec l'évolution de l'humanité. La démocratie est notre bien commun. Soutenons-nous les uns les autres et faisons-la vivre avec l'exigence la plus rigoureuse, car en effet, l'autre danger auquel la démocratie est exposée est endogène, résultant des baisses des exigences démocratiques. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. We go now to Denmark. Prime Minister Frederiksen.
Thank you, Mr. President, for hosting this second Summit for Democracy. It is great to see all of you, and thank you for your interesting interventions today. In today's digital age, tech is at the heart of our democracy. Billions of people have access to knowledge and information. And even across continents, we can communicate, exchange information, views as we do right now. One example is sitting right here in our circle, Mr. President Zelenskyy. Every day you speak directly to your people and to the world. You are constantly in contact with governments, parliaments, and other democratic forces and our people. Your example shows us how tech can keep democracy alive under extremely difficult circumstances. In the fight for democracy, tech is part of the solution, but tech can also be used to oppress, to hide the truth, to censor, and to control people. Russia is one example. Unfortunately, it is not the only one. Around the world, we see anti-democratic forces shutting down the internet, using tech to control people, to restrict freedom of expression. And even in established democracies, tech can challenge the public debate. We see echo chambers emerge on social media, fake news, and hate speech against women, minorities, and political opponents. Tech giants have a responsibility, and so do we as political leaders. One of the big tasks facing us today is how do we make tech work for the democracy and not against it? Denmark is proud to contribute to this agenda. 2 years ago, we launched our own platform, Tech for Democracy, that brings together governments, organizations, tech industry, and, of course, the civil society. We have rallied more than 200 partners now around a new vision for a democratic digital future. We want tech to enhance democratic debate, to promote human rights, to protect democratic values. And with our new funding mechanism, Digital Democracy Initiative, we have committed to this very purpose. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, in the midst of the digital age, we have a great opportunity to make democracy blossom. Thank you, dear colleagues. We have to support Ukraine against Russia's aggression. We have to ensure a sustainable development all over the world, and we have, of course, to fight climate change. And we have to stand up for our common values. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. President Cortizo, Panama, the floor is yours.
Muy buenos días, Presidente Biden, colegas presidentes, secretario Blinken. Quisiera iniciar mi exposición con algunas reflexiones personales sobre la democracia. Si tuviera que elegir entre las muchas definiciones de democracia, la que a mi juicio se acerca más al concepto es la de Abraham Lincoln, cuando dijo: el gobierno del pueblo, por el pueblo y para el pueblo. Democracia es también respeto por los derechos humanos, la diversidad, la justicia, el imperio de la ley, transparencia, libertad de expresión, vivir dignamente. La situación que vivimos hoy a nivel mundial está determinada por problemas globales como la crisis climática, las migraciones irregulares, el narcotráfico que disputa poder a los estados, las alzas en el precio de los insumos y alimentos. A estos factores se suman conflictos como la guerra en Ucrania y los justos reclamos de inclusión que hacen numerosos grupos marginados del desarrollo económico y social. Todo ello impacta negativamente en el ejercicio pleno de la democracia. Frente a este escenario, los gobernantes tenemos la responsabilidad de desarrollar políticas públicas para reducir las brechas de la pobreza y la desigualdad. Si no hacemos eso, la democracia continuará siendo un ejercicio electoral periódico, sin otro resultado que el cambio de gobernantes, la pérdida de confianza en el sistema y cultivo para la inestabilidad social. A veces pensamos en la democracia como una fórmula por sí misma que puede solucionar los problemas que agobian a los pueblos. En ese sentido, cito a Nelson Mandela cuando dijo: si no hay comida cuando se tiene hambre, si no hay medicamentos cuando se está enfermo, si hay ignorancia, si no se respetan los derechos elementales de las personas, la democracia es una cáscara vacía, aunque los ciudadanos voten y tengan parlamento. Y quiero aprovechar la palabra de ese gran dirigente sudafricano para referirme a la importancia significativa que tiene para mí la soberanía alimentaria. En ese sentido, me refiero a respetar el derecho de nuestros países de contar con una producción agropecuaria que asegure suficientes alimentos para la población y la protección de nuestros productores. Sobre el particular, y en el caso de Panamá, durante los años más difíciles de la pandemia, con puertos y aeropuertos del mundo cerrados, fueron nuestros productores agropecuarios los que nos aseguraron llevar suficientes alimentos de calidad a nuestra población. En ese sentido, las relaciones comerciales, bilaterales y multilaterales deben considerar de manera justa las asimetrías entre nuestros países y el enorme daño que nos hacen las prácticas desleales de comercio, de modo que aseguremos un intercambio equitativo entre los países. Para países como el nuestro, la soberanía alimentaria como instrumento para generar trabajo y riqueza dentro de nuestra frontera también es un factor que fortalece la democracia y contribuye a la paz social. Termino refiriéndome a la crisis climática, principal desafío global que afecta la vida de todos los seres vivientes. Sobre ese tema, quiero recordar que Panamá contribuye como uno de los 3 países en el mundo carbono negativo. Sin embargo, si los esfuerzos realizados por un país pequeño y emergente como el nuestro no encuentran correspondencia de parte de quienes deben aportar más, cabe preguntarse cuál es el compromiso de los países más industrializados. Sobre el particular, les recomiendo leer y ejecutar las acciones para la supervivencia del reciente informe de síntesis de los científicos del IPCC, el IPCC, sobre el calentamiento global. En resumen, hay que actuar en esta década. Hay que pasar de los discursos a las acciones concretas. Presidentes, de nada sirve exaltar las virtudes de la democracia, como si éstas fueran suficientes para solucionar los problemas de los países, si no ejecutamos acciones concretas para poner en práctica esos conceptos democráticos en el contexto global. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, President Cortizo. President Biden, any concluding comments?
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your last comments. I agree with you completely. Then let me just close by thanking all of you again for making a priority for your country and for the world more democracy. You know, we're covering a lot of ground in these sessions today on all ways democracy is at the heart of all that we hope to achieve and for our people. Spurring economic growth, shared prosperity, unfolding justice, and upholding it as well, strengthening our institutions, taking global challenges, tackling them head on, advancing inclusion and equity for all our people. The great strength of democracy is that it gives us all the tools we need for self-government and self-improvement. And I'm proud to stand with all of you to defend those fundamental values we all share: justice, the rule of law, free speech, assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and our core belief in the interest of human rights for every single individual in the world. You know, we've accomplished a great deal together, but we all know how much work lies ahead. We've proven we're up to the challenge, but with the Republic of Korea hosting the next Summit of Democracy, we're going to keep going together, all of us. So I thank you all very much. I won't take any more of your time, but I've been impressed by what you've had to say. Thank you all very, very much.